Want to know more about being a school-based BCBA or what the role is of a school-based BCBA? Well, you are in for an amazing conversation. Today, I talked with my friend and colleague, Ron DeMuesy. He is a wealth of information. He has a master's of education degree from The Ohio State University, where he studied under the advisement of Dr. Nancy Neef and Dr. Bill Heward, who I've got to meet at conferences, which has been amazing. So Ron is a special education teacher and a BCBA and a certified Ohio behavior analyst. He has really worked in the private sector and also in public school settings. And that's where he's worked the majority of his time. And so today in this episode, you will learn what it is that we do as school-based BCBAs. And these things are extremely nuanced. And I think that being a BCBA in a clinical setting versus being a BCBA who's employed by a school district is very different. And I think that's kind of the wave of the future. It seems like a lot of school districts are employing BCBAs to work in-house in the district. And so I saw this kind of coming up in a lot of the conversations I was having. And so last year, Ron started doing some pretty semi-regular trainings for us in the ABA Speech Connection, all about what happens as a school-based BCBA and what you may need to know and what skills you may need to feel confident. So he has a lot of courses that he's done in the ABA Speech Connection. We've put those together, if you're not in the connection, in a product called the School-Based BCBA Starter Pack. So I'm going to put those in the show notes today. And today we have a really great conversation about all these nuanced things that are helpful to know. In addition, because we don't want anybody to feel alone in the very important work that you're doing, Ron is going to do a Q&A for us on September 9th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. I will share more information about this through my newsletter at abaspeech.org, so make sure that you join us there. And this will be a time for us just to connect and talk about different things that are happening so you can feel supported in the very important work that you do. Let's get into this conversation with Ron. I'm Rose Griffin, a speech therapist, board-certified behavior analyst, and founder of ABA Speech. It wasn't all that long ago that I felt overwhelmed by providing therapy for my autistic students and any students who were not yet speaking. Fast forward through many doubts, tears, research, and courses, and you will see the framework that I use today and share with over 60,000 readers weekly. One that will help you support your students and feel more confident in the process. I created the ABA Speech podcast to give you simple, step-by-step strategies to help you reach all of your students wherever they are on their communication journeys. If you're a speech therapist, BCBA, RBT student, or parent who's looking to help all students develop a way to communicate with the world, you are in the right place, friend. Let's get started. Thanks for coming on the show, Ron. I'm so excited to talk.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited as well.
And I feel like you've been in my orbit for a while. I think I was probably stalking you for a while because I saw you present at OHABA, which is our Ohio ABA conference, a long time ago. And I thought, I like this guy. He seems professional and nice, and he knows what he's talking about. And he's into ABA, which is it's a lot of qualifications that I'm like, I like this person. A lot of green flags. So last year, I remember I reached out to you to do a course that was focused on school-based BCBAs, because that is something I've really seen as somebody who has always divided my time as a public school employee here in Ohio. I definitely have a soft spot for supporting those who work in public schools, and just seeing the shift of BCBAs traditionally back in the day, working in a clinic, going into a school district as a consultant. And now it seems like a lot of districts are employing BCBAs, which I think has so many pros for BCBAs in the long run, just kind of like financially and lifestyle and things like that. But boy, is it different than working in a clinic. So thank you for your support. And I know we'll talk about some of the things that you've been doing at ABA Speech, but it's been fun to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost the same thing. I remember seeing you present at OWABA and thinking, you know what? And I appreciate your willingness to come and speak to the group of RBTs that I used to work with, because I think that's important, particularly with your speech background. So yeah, it's kind of both been in the orbit for a while.
Oh yeah, that's right. I did that talk for your RBT. That was
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, I remember that. You reached out to
yeah.
me. So tell us, how did you get into the field? I'm not sure if I mean, I read your bio, but I'm not sure if I really know that. How
Uh,
did you get into ABA?
Completely by happenstance. I was a psychology major that did not want my senior year of college. I did not want any. My second semester didn't want any classes before 11 a.m. So I took an 11. I remember this specifically. It was 11:35 education class, and I remember that because I thought, boy, that's perfect. I don't want to do so. It met requirements 11:35, and at the end of the class, when the class was over at the end of the semester, the professor said to me, "Hey, there's a videotape I'd like you to watch and give me your thoughts on this." And I thought, okay, that's interesting. It's not part of the class. And she said, no. So it was about a video that a family had produced who has a son with autism. They live in South Florida. I watched the video and thought, why not? So I ended up contacting them. Back in the day, it was all phone calls. And I spent 2 years living and working with them
Oh.
and their family. And I was sort of there 24/7 and had no idea what I was doing. There's probably evidence to say I still don't, but was new to autism, was new to folks with disabilities. I had a couple, early classes, but nothing. So I was there for a couple years and really, really was hooked. And then came back to Columbus and started doing some in-home work with families. Again, just kind of word of mouth stuff, and then went went back, got my master's to be actually an IS, but then continued to get my BCBA certification and been working in schools ever since. But it was literally because I was being lazy as a college senior.
Okay, so I actually had a class. I remember my senior year of undergrad that started, it was actually like a 3 or 4 hour class, and it's all I had on a Thursday, but it was an education class and it was back to back. And I remember I had to take that so that I could be a speech therapist in the schools. But I was always really struggling in that class because the biggest night to go out in college was Wednesday night. So we would go out hard. Sorry. We go on
Yeah,
hard Wednesday night, boot scooting saloon, paninis, and it was ladies' night. And then the next day I had to do that 4 hour class. And then I'll tell you what, then I think I worked at the library from 12 to 5. And then I was spent. I remember I lived with my parents during undergrad because I went to a commuter school, University of Akron. And I think I
yeah,
watched ER with my mom or Grey's Anatomy or something. And then after that, I was just like, it was like 9 p.m. And I was like, it was like,
yeah,
it was a
yeah,
long day, let me tell you. Oh, I missed that. That's fun. So
yeah.
similar, must have been on a similar track there for
Yeah,
the late
I
20s.
remember, week 1 or 2 thinking to myself, why does he was 18 at that point. I was 18. And
Yeah.
I just remember thinking to myself, why does he always repeat what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then I learned, oh, that's echolalia. Or
Right.
boy, he's got these routines that man, he's does the same thing every time. Yeah, I learned sort of on the fly, but it was an amazing experience. We're still connected today. He was in my
Yeah.
wedding.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
so
and
cool.
he's an amazing individual. His family, they're amazing as well.
That's cool. I love that story. Yeah, I actually know somebody here locally. I was a speech therapist in home, and she was a live-in nanny for two autistic kids. They were twins at the time, and then she went on to become a speech therapist and a BCABA. It's kind of a neat story, just kind of being immersed in the field. So, oh, thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. So today we're going to talk about being a BCBA in the schools. So, can you share your thoughts on being a BCBA in the schools? I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit in the intro, but it's really kind of shifted, don't you think? And I feel like every state's probably different, but here in Ohio, I've definitely seen a difference in the field since I've been dually certified.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a major shift, at least here in Central Ohio, in the past 10 years or so. Way back when we started a little behavior group of people that would get together and talk about behavior, and it was myself, the only behavior analyst. I had another colleague of mine who was a counselor. There was a really really astute guidance counselor from another district, not a BCBA. And then the fourth person in that little group was a teacher who went on to become a behavior consultant. But back at that point, she was a teacher. Last year, that same little group has mushroomed to almost 35 people. Most are BCBAs or RBTs. Yeah, there's been a huge shift, I think. I think, like you mentioned, there is really an interesting benefit for schools for hiring BCBAs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say this to make anyone mad. And, I have lots of friends who work in clinics or other organizations, but I think it's so volatile and so variable now in the last 5 or 6 years, how companies have come and gone. And I think, I don't know if that's been a huge factor for districts, but to me, it would make sense, to find good people and to try and maintain that in-house, just because of the volatility that's happening outside of schools.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very gross generalization, but it seems to be that companies are coming and going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that seems kind of that old consultant role, at least I know. Now, it was easier for me, obviously, as a school-based SLP to work with an outside BCBA consultant because I'm duly certified. So I usually
Yeah.
knew the person, okay, and we had a rapport. And if not, it was kind of like this, like, oh, you're a BCBA too kind of thing. But I sometimes think when at least just it's been my take. If somebody is an employee of the district and they're a BCBA and they're working with people in the district, I feel like people that are district employees kind of let their guard down more and they are not as defensive if a BCBA is coming into their classroom or is coming into their speech session to give them feedback about maybe a kid that's having problem behavior. That seems to usually be the case when a BCBA comes in. Have you found that to be true too, that it might be a little bit easier to take feedback when it's an in-house person that's part of the district?
I do. I think it's easier. It's also, I think it's easier just from the reliability factor, knowing that I could, an in-house BCBA, I can have access to them. It may not be daily, but it might be at a level that I need as a classroom teacher, right? Whereas an outside BCBA may not have that flexibility. No fault to that BCBA at all, the outside consultant. I think that I think just the availability to understand the environment from a school-based BCBA,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that I'm having regular contact with this teacher, I can spend time in that classroom to look at some of the other variables that he or she may be dealing with. Whereas sometimes, and this is just how it works. Again, no faults to outside consultants, but sometimes time is limited, right? So I have a limited amount of time to understand all the other variables or be in the space, or it's harder to develop rapport with that
Mm-hmm.
teacher to get
Yeah.
them to open up a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about that. So you've done some courses, I think 3, and there's going to be 4 by the time we tape this. And we've kind of put them together into, and I'll put this in the show notes, called School-Based BCBA Starter Pack, that just gets you ready to feel more confident being a BCBA in the schools. Because that's the truth, is like, I always say working in the schools, the most important and the most powerful person usually in a building is the administrative assistant. And so it's some of those nuanced things that you're like, no, really. Like, no, it's not the sped director. It's not the principal. See this person here at this desk at the front door that you
Yes.
buzz into? You be friends with that person because that person knows how everything works in this building. And so, and I think too, like I've done a lot of like business courses now, and it's like understanding different personality types and taking your Enneagram and like all these things. But to go to say what I've already been doing as a public school employee is going into this classroom and dealing with teacher A is very different from going into this classroom and dealing with teacher B. And the way that I go in, and some people are like, oh, come in anytime. Don't even tell me. Just like come in. And other people, it's like, when are you coming in? What are you doing? And I know how I need to talk to different people. And I've kind of just, being in the schools has kind of shaped my behavior. But don't you think that's true? Like every single personality is so different. And going into somebody's classroom is like a very big deal. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think starting with the idea that people are doing the best they can with the information they have. Right. There's definitely scenarios, and they come up in social media, they come up at conferences where you have somebody who's, purposely, avoiding or engaging in behavior that is, that's not conducive to student learning. But I think primarily people are doing the best they can with the information they have, and sort of having that as a kind of a boilerplate idea, even if you're in a classroom and thinking, oh my gosh, this is chaos. I think having that and sort of understanding that. You mentioned the conversation where you have teachers say, just come in anytime, it doesn't matter.
Right.
That could be good or bad, right? It could be
Right.
good or bad. I mean, it sounds good unless it's a really tricky day, and the teacher has given you that statement. But uh, I usually try and drill down a little bit more, right? And try down and say, and I've gotten in this weird habit. You talk about having your behavior being shaped. Mine is clearly being shaped because I have this habit now of always trying to plan visits that alternate. So if a teacher says, "Oh, this is really 10 o'clock, midweek is tricky for the student," now I'm finding myself tending to ask, "Okay, what's a good day to see you? What's a day that you're really nailing it as a teacher?
Mm-hmm.
What's the time and what's the day?" And so somehow my visits have shaped into coming when there's an issue, but the next visit is probably going to be a time when there's no issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's given for some teachers, it lets them feel like he's not just here, continually watching me when I'm, doing the worst I can do.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely been shaped in that way.
Yeah. So for BCBAs are going to be working in a school-based setting because clinic-based and school-based BCBA, I feel like there's definitely a difference. Kind of like in the world of speech pathology. It's like, are you working in medical speech pathology, which would be aphasia, TBI, strokes, swallowing, things like that, versus school-based speech therapy that you could have a speech therapist that's doing each job and it's so very different. And I think that's very true of the schools too, because it's extremely nuanced. Like we've tried to cover in a lot of the courses that you've been doing. But can you tell us some of the top things that are important about knowing about working as a BCBA in a school setting? What are some things that are top of mind that you're like, this is important to know?
Uh, I think a couple things. Number one, and I'm going to say this kind of tongue in cheek, watch your language. We come in with language that a lot of people don't understand. And we want to be technically sound as BCBAs. We want to, God forbid, another BCBA overheard the language I was using in a classroom, and I thought, boy, he doesn't know what he's talking about because of the language. There's tons of studies out there. You can read them all about how our language, it's not preferred. So really watching our language in schools, I think as a younger BCBA, my goal was to try and make sure that I turned people into mini BCBAs by making sure they had the language and the lingo and the jargon. And I feel like there's a lot of situations I'd love to rewind and not go in like that. So watching the language in the same way, ditch the forms. I used to go in with a lot of forms and make a lot of requests. I'm not saying ditch the content of the forms. I'm saying what I'm saying is find a way to get the information you need, right? Commit the form to memory or commit the questions, right? Let's just talk about an FBA, but do it in a more casual manner. Let people talk. Let them describe what's happening. Let them don't worry so much initially about and again, I'm saying this out of my own mistakes, but don't worry so much initially about an operational definition, right? I know what the ethical code says, but let people talk. You'll get there, right? If there's particular forms that you like, particular things that you have, tools, try and find a way to have a conversation about it rather than it's such a different way of doing it. There's a reason that you asked me to come and we're doing Q&A and we're talking to one another. You could have easily just said, look, I interviewed Ron and here's what he said, blah, 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 right? More form. So I think, and I think the other big thing to think about is become a teacher, become a skill builder. That's, I think, a thing. Now, that's not what you may be tasked with doing. from your special ed leadership, from a teacher. Most of the time it's, we want this thing to stop. And again, that's, we're all about that. But things don't stop unless there's something there. So getting people to, I used to not ask the question. I'm working with a teacher, and he says, "Oh, I just like this to be a dull roar." And I never asked the follow up, which is, what would they be doing instead? What would you like to see them do? And I think that's a big piece, because that's not, at some level, the EOs that were being presented. It's a mess. There's a fire. We have people getting hurt. Maybe we have kids getting hurt. This needs to stop. And I think trying to be okay with it, get comfortable with asking that question, because it's uncomfortable, because somebody wants you to stop something, and the first thing you're asking is, what do you want to replace it with? It sounds like you're dodging the question. It may sound like you don't know what to do, right? I'm kind of delaying until I can figure it out, but I think it's so very important. So yeah, become a teacher. Figure out, in my head, I think about some of the best teachers that I've ever had, behavior analytic or not, and what did they do? And I think that's really important. I'd say the other thing is, it's kind of a combined. Find a mentor. Please don't, once you get your certification, that I had this conversation with a BCBA who just got her certificate, and she said, "I can't be a mentor for somebody." Yes, you can. You could be a mentor for somebody who hasn't passed the exam yet, right? And I think as BCBAs, it should always go both ways. So find a mentor, be a mentor, connect yourself, I guess, is the sort of bottom line.
Yeah, I love that, because as a speech therapist, we have something called our clinical fellowship year, which is, it depends on who your supervisor is, but you have to have certain documentation. You have to have a supervisor. And it's not like you pay that person. It's very different. It's like you're getting your normal salary, you're employed as a speech language pathologist, but you have this support in your first year. And I think that's really nice. I heard another BCBA talk about that on a podcast, that it would be nice if BCBAs had that, but who knows? There's always things in the newsletters that are changing. So maybe they'll put that on there too, because that's the truth. And I think that's what we've tried to do at the ABA Speech Connection, is have that community support where we do the live events, if you're able to log in live. And we've been doing the ones that are school-based, where you've been doing some, and we have some that are going to take place with other people this year every month. We've been doing them during the school day, so people can kind of plan ahead at noon, which is like Eastern time, people's lunch hour. Maybe if you're on Pacific, it's like the start of your day, or Mountain time. I try to think about all the time zones. And that can be nice. It's just a community of support. And people have been so responsive. I know when I had that first idea to have you come and do a school-based talk, and we put it into the school-based BCBA Facebook group, which, shout out to them. I don't even know who runs it, but they're very organized and kind over there. We had, 500 comments of people that wanted to attend, because people want to feel connected, and they don't want to feel alone in the work. And that's the thing. As a speech therapist on campus, I can feel extremely alone in some of the districts I've worked in, because I might be the only person in the building and nobody gets it. But as a BCBA, you really could feel alone, because you're probably the only BCBA maybe in the entire district. And maybe you're just like helping the SPED director write the job description, right? And you're setting the boundaries for, like, this is in my role, this is not within my role. And that can feel really hard and emotionally draining. So I feel like a lot of the coursework that you've done in the ABA Speech Connection has been helpful to try to shape up those conversations that people will be taking then into their own district, to feel empowered in what their role is and how they can help the district without burning themselves out, because a lot of people need your support, especially if it's behavior, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You point out the absolute scenario that I just last year worked with several BCBAs who were doing exactly what you said. Forget the day-to-day job of the classroom. They were helping the SPED director write the job description, right? And how do you even get your head around that let alone knowing now I have to, okay, I have a meeting like that, and then I am going into a classroom, and God loves the teacher, but she doesn't take an ounce of data, right? That's such a
Right.
wide span that, absolutely. Um, I think in my head, I wish that this continued sort of mentorship is uh, it's so important. I've done some work at the BACB, and they continue to talk about that, and they continue to, when asked that question, I've had a chance to ask some people that, and they think it's going to be through organizations like yours. It's going to be through state organizations.
Hmm.
That's um, it's such an important piece. There are situations that I come across 3 or 4 times a year, and I'm talking now specific student issue. I have no idea. I don't have experience in that realm,
Right.
or I don't have experience in whatever it is. Right? I mean, there's so
Hmm.
many variables. So trying to stay connected, trying to make those connections, taking risks to reach out to people. I think.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And we'll put that in the show notes. We're going to have a Q&A with Ron in September to kind of go through just kind of building that network of support that you're not alone. I think that's the other thing that's tricky about the public schools is in our code as BCBAs, we talk about scope of practice and competence. And we know that if we're not familiar with something, we ethically are called to get a mentor, take professional development, potentially refer out. And then that gets really hard because in a public school, we serve everybody. And so then we could do a whole hour talk on that, but that
Yep.
gets really tricky. Like, how do you advocate for yourself in a professional way? What is a union? Like there's a lot of things that are like, oh my goodness. Okay, so come to the talk you'll have done the talk already, but we'll probably
Yeah.
put that into the school-based BCBA starter pack. So I'll put that in the show notes. Another cool thing that you do is you have been working with FTF Consulting. So can you tell us just a little bit about your role there, and I guess what FTF Consulting is for those of us that don't know?
Yeah. FTF Consulting is a group uh, in Worcester, Massachusetts, founded by Greg Hanley, Kelsey Ruppel, Tony Camilleri, and Mashid Guy Magami. And the primary role of FTF is to teach others how to analyze and skill build for individuals with severe problem behavior, right? So a lot of people have heard about the practical functional assessment, skill-based treatment, the ISCA analysis. Um, they are now in multinational group.
Mhm.
They're all through the United States and different countries. My role there as a lead consultant, it's a little bit of everything. I would say probably the biggest for me is I'm a supportive role in terms of um, if they have the number of clients. There's some of us who are part time, which I am.
Mhm.
So a lot of times, what we do as part time employees is we have sort of the overflow when they have a lot of clients going, or there's particular situations. There's a handful of us that will step in and lead groups or individuals. When I say individuals, I mean the particular BCBAs, but usually groups of people, usually with a 3-person cohort. So they typically have 3 clients, probably 3 BCBAs, and they go through the same cohort, 16 weeks of virtual support like this,
Hmm.
all the way from the interview to the analysis to skill-based treatment. The other role that some of us have kind of morphed into a little bit is assisting with research that FTF is conducting or like to conduct, and so that's been again more of whatever help is needed. What can we do? Um, the valuable part for me is there are still clinical meetings once a month that we meet and talk about uh, kind of the spectrum, kind of like we're doing here, Rose. It could be an individual case level. It could be, um, at a systems level to um, further the reach of skill based treatment. Could be at sort of a bigger level of providing big picture ideas. They actually have something. once a month as well that they're
Oh,
putting out, big ideas to supplement folks who've already been in the process, right? Always trying
mhm.
to iterate the process.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And I've talked with Dr. Hanley on Instagram and maybe Facebook about potentially coming on the show. But I think for speech therapists, BCBAs know who Dr. Hanley is. He's extremely charismatic and he's just a thought leader, disruptor in the space. He's just awesome. And everything he says on podcasts, I'm like, 100%. I need to talk to this person. But I think for speech therapists, they would not know who Dr. Hanley is. So I feel like it would just be kind of an introduction to really what he's done in the field and kind of made people kind of perk up and think about like, why are we doing things the way that we're doing them? And he just has a really cool way of explaining things and of helping people who are just vulnerable populations. So I really admire his work. And he's a very busy person. So I always hit him up probably every 3 months. I'm like, hey, you want to come on the
Yeah.
podcast? But we've
Yeah.
had some people on. Corey Whalen Wallen.
Yeah.
I always mess his name up. But he's PhD level, I believe, SLP BCBA. He's been on the show.
Yeah.
And so he's part of helping out with that organization too. And I love the work that they're doing. So it's cool. But a lot of speech language pathologists may, in the schools, sometimes people may say like, oh, they're on the My Way program, which is like, comes from that. But there's a
Yes.
lot more to that. But I think an introduction to kind of what that is something we're working on here because his work is really just, being disseminated and used all over. So I feel like some people would not know who he is or what the work stems from, all the research. So it's cool that you're a part of that.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I think one of the other things I would think about too is one of the other focus, and by no means does FTF corner the market on this, but I think they're providing more concrete marching orders on some things. It's really about this idea, Rose, and you know this, and I do too. Um, the ends no longer justify the means. And what I mean by that is, looking at your programming, is it compassion based? Is it empathetic? There's been some recent papers out there that, um, this is not, this is old news, so to speak. But I do think there's actual steps looking forward to say, look, the procedures we're using, we always talk about, validity and in a school system, right? What's the treatment acceptance of this, right? What's the treatment integrity? Hopefully I wouldn't use treatment integrity in that way, but is the second grade teacher following the plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say it that way. And I think the procedures have a lot to do with that. It
Mm-hmm.
has a lot to do with what's at the center of your treatment, what's at the center um, of your intervention. And I think FTF is really starting to open people's eyes up and say, look, there's some better ways to get to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe a little bit longer than we're used to, but there's a lot in there, right? If we want people to engage in our treatment and we want students to participate with us, right?
Right.
Particularly in schools. You brought up a huge point earlier. They're coming to our schools. So we need them to engage with us, right? This is not a clinic or a treatment where we have the ability to, kind of flex and there's a wait list. And
Mm-hmm.
so we need them to be engaged. We need them to want to work with us. We need them to
Right.
want to cooperate with us. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on, because you are the president-elect of OABA. I hope is that how you say it?
yeah,
The
yeah.
Ohio ABA organization. Can you share a little bit, congrats on that. I mean, that's super exciting. Can you share just a little bit about the organization, maybe how many members we have now and just maybe the mission of the organization? And we usually have a conference, right? Every year, usually in March, I believe.
Yes, it's every year in March, usually second or third week of March. I believe in 2026, it's going to be, boy, I should know this as the president elect, but I believe it's going to be the second week of March. Listen, I think now we have up to 430 some members.
Nice.
I think our current leadership, Dr. Nikki Williams, she's done a really nice job of kind of reorienting our membership to the missions, right? To disseminate ABA, to build networks with people. It's interesting that we were talking about that earlier. I think that's exactly what she would like to do. She's done some really nice work in sort of realigning the goals of Awaba. Please check out the website. We're shockingly, she's got us all now taking data on how well we're collaborating. What are the inroads we're making? We still have a very strong. We have a very strong presence in the school community. I think equally, we have a presence in the, I guess I would say, outside of school, folks looking for resources and information about billing and Medicaid. And I know all of that's in flux, and that's an area that I'm not as familiar, but I know that that would be another important way to stay connected. I know they're continuing to work, having aspects of that work because it's relevant to a lot of our membership.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, I'm really excited for you to be in that role. And you guys always bring in really awesome speakers. I met Dr. Rick Cabina. He's been on the show. He's super smart and just like so smart and great at business.
Yeah.
Shout out Central Reach. And Bruce Tinner, I think you had him. I had him on the show. Then he came and he talked. I know you just have some really great people. So that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. If you want to hear more of Ron talking, I'll put in the show notes our bundle of courses. It's 5 hours of content, school-based BCBA starter pack. And then we're going to do one more new course with you later this month. And then also in September, make sure you join our newsletter at abaspeech.org because I will be sharing there. We have over 61,000 engaged weekly readers, which is super exciting. We are going to try something new. And in September, we're going to do a Q&A with myself and Ron about school-based BCBA services. And so make sure that you tune in for that. So thank you so much, Ron, for coming onto the show. It was great to connect.
Thank you.